Hi, it's Dia. Today I'm going to take this image again, which is from my coloring book, The Buns, and I'm going to use CONTE Pastel pencils. And I'm going to also show you really quickly at the beginning of this that they currently make a CONTE of Paris sharpener. I think you know from the past, and I will link this below, but I made a video of how hard it was to keep those CONTE pencils sharp. So I'm going to just jump right in. And the first CONTE color that I used was number 24. Why did I think these had names? Well, anyway, it's number 24. And what I'm going to try to do here is recreate the picture that I had posted a few days ago that I had done using Prismacolor pencils. That took me a very, very long time. So I wanted to see if, in fact, my idea that using CONTE pastels would be faster. So right off the bat, the first bunch of dots that or circles that I would consider to be the areas of the bokeh were much quicker. Now, all I did here was make them a little bit bigger because since they glow, you have to cover some of the glowy area with the darker color, so I just lightly went over the areas that I chose and made them a little bit bigger because I didn't want the areas to cover too much of those dots because then they would just be, in my opinion, too little. So right off the bat, like I said, that was faster, but okay, so that was an upside, but the downside of these pencils right off the bat is that they're dusty. By the end of this drawing, the top of the top of the coloring image was, I can't even say dirty looking, but it was dusty looking. So now what I'm doing here is going right over the light yellow with this sunny bright yellow, and this is number 4. Now I'm leaving that area in the center of the overlap of those two bokeh images lighter because when one of the bokeh overlaps another one, the area of overlap is lighter because it's two areas of light, so it appears brighter. I'm going to leave most of this video in real time just because it did end up that using CONTEs is much faster by quite a bit. So I just left it, and this way you can check out what I'm doing because I know that using pastel pencils isn't the most popular coloring method, so this might be a little bit different. And you might want to check it out. Oh, sorry, that color that I was just using was number 37. And this one is number 12. They're all in the yellow and orange family. Now, I'm not that familiar with using pastels either, so this is another experiment for me too. So if it doesn't come out wonderful, I'm going to leave it anyway, just because it's a test. I keep wanting to pick up my brush that I dust away shavings with or eraser filament pieces, and I really can't because it makes quite a bunch of lines and it makes quite a mess. Now right here what I did was add a little bit of a fuzzy darker area between those two bokeh, because if you look at a reference photo you can see that Certain areas look glowy in the background a little bit, but there's not quite one of those perfectly round bokeh, so that's what I was trying to form. So I have my general shapes there, and this is number 54. And this I'm going to speed up because all I'm doing here is going around all of the bokeh and all of the leaves with the one shade of brown. I love using pastel pencils, and I think I said this in another video, but I am going to say it again just because I'm using them here. I illustrated a kid's book a while ago using pastel pencils, and there was only 24 in the whole set, but you can mix and match so nicely with them, and you can overlap other colors and they blend very nicely. Well, I just said 24 pencils. Let me check if there was 24 or 48. I'll be right back. Okay, I can't find the box right this second. I want to get this video finished. So it was either a 24 set or a 48 set. In any event, it was much less pencils, or it was fewer pencils, I should say, than I would have had in my set of Prismacolors or my Polychromos pencils. But they're so nice to use. They're so bright, they're so vibrant, and they do have a bit of grit in them, and that allows for the pencils to be blended very, very easily. And if you don't have them, or if you want to try them, just a bit of heads up, they're a little expensive. You can get them in open stock. You can get them on Amazon, but they're not as readily available as many of the other colored pencils that we commonly use. So what I did here was take a blender and I started to go around the perimeter of the circles with little tiny circular motions to blend the brown into the colored area. And I have to say, so far, I like the way the image is coming out. I can't say either one of these images is perfect, but I don't even know if I mind because the background is supposed to be a little bit fuzzy and diffused anyway. And the things in the foreground, in this case, the leaves, are supposed to be super sharp and super in focus, where the background is supposed to be blurry, and it's a little bit of it's a little bit of a trick for your eyes. Another thing that's different about pastel pencils versus regular colored pencils is that, as you can see, the blenders pick up a lot of the pigment, probably because it's very dusty, and you can actually do some coloring with what you pick up. Whereas with the colored pencils, it's more of a, what is it more of? It's more of getting rid of the white that shows through on the paper and making it look smoother versus actually moving the pigment around. The pastels get considerably lighter and muted after you touch them even lightly with a blender. So you kind of have to get used to it as a different medium. I did. I mean, like I said, I did that whole book, and you kind of forget, because I have been so used to using colored pencils that it's almost like muscle memory, like when you play an instrument or a guitar, you get used to doing one thing. So your mind is almost telling you, you just use pencils, so it's going to be the same. So just be aware that it's a little bit different. It's a lot of fun, but it's a little bit different. When I was done with this brown, I I thought that I could finish here, but I kind of wanted it to be comparable to the other one that I did with the colored pencils a few days ago. So I did end up going in at the end with the black. Oh, and the other thing about the black in the pastel pencils is that it is super black. It's like black velvet, and it's gorgeous. So here I'm going to start with the black, and when I color, I always try to start when I use dark pencils with the area that's going to remain the darkest, because it's much easier to move the color out of the area than to try to get rid of it from an area that you already put it, unless you're really going to go in there and change it with an eraser. It's easier, especially with a pastel pencil, to push the color outward or toward a less pigmented area. So start in the areas that are going to be the darkest. I have a few other types of pastel pencils too that I can recommend. I like the Derwent pastels. They have many colors, and I did supplement my Conte set with a few of them. I also use some of the Stabilo pastels, and I do have to say they are different though. They're not exactly compatible. It's kind of like Prismas versus Polys. One is oil, one is wax. I don't know what the difference in the bases of are these, but the other ones, meaning not the Contes, but the other two that I just mentioned, are, they seem more like colored pencils, and they're creamier. They're not necessarily brighter, but they're it feels like there's more of a waxy or oily filler. So if you try to go over them with the Contes, you're not going to have much luck. You can draw it next to it and incorporate it into a picture, but don't try to go over the top of it with with the Contes. So now I'm going over the black and I'm incorporating it into the brown and even into the lighter areas. And I'm sorry you keep hearing me blowing away the dust, but if I pick up the paper every time and tap it, which I would do if I was drawing a very important picture, if I was doing a commission, I would be much more careful. But for the sake of the video and for saving time, I just keep blowing the dust away. Oh, and by the way, these blenders that I buy, I either get them on Amazon from Creative Mark or any other company that you might like, and I get them in bulk because yes, you can sharpen them with, you can, well, not really sharpen them. You can get rid of the marked areas or colored areas on the tip, but I like to have a whole bunch of them on hand so I can just grab when I want to change colors. You wouldn't necessarily want to try to blend a pastel pencil, a lighter area that you just went over with black. Same holds true for colored pencils. I decided I wasn't going to color the leaves in this picture. Since I did it in the last picture, you kind of have an idea of what they look like. And if you haven't seen that other video, I will put the link below. So right about here, I was thinking, it's not very vibrant, it's not great. And I realized I was a little afraid. I was like nervous because I wasn't used to doing it. And then I said, you know what, give it a whirl. So I went over the whole thing and I pushed much harder with the colors that I had already used. That's that lemony color, which is number 4. And I also went out of the lines. I colored into the darker area because the bokeh have kind of a glowy halo effect around them. So to enhance that, I colored into the darker area with the lighter pencils. And I really liked the result. So I thought by enhancing the colors and making them more vibrant and going outside the lines here, that it would look a little bit more contrasty. But even after I did that, I thought that the background, meaning the darker area, was still a little vague. So I ended up going in and doing that again. And I realized I was afraid to do that too because I wasn't really familiar with doing the bokeh with pastels. So in a few minutes, you'll see that I go over it again. Now you just saw me look at the tip of the pencil. And sometimes with pastels, I try to find a flatter surface if I'm going to color in a bigger area. You can see how vibrant pastels are, and that's one of the reasons I really love working with them. I have to try pan pastels too. Somebody said, I think it was in one of the comments on one of my videos, that pan pastels are really nice and that they're very good for backgrounds. So I'm going to give that a whirl too. Now on this one I goofed. It almost looks like that one that I was just working on kind of stops at the leaves, and I will adjust that a little bit later. I started to blend in some of the darker area in the background with the lighter pastel. Okay, now I'm erasing some of that area against the stems where I said I kind of goofed over there. Oops, cracked one of those pencils. So that worked out better now. It looks like a round bokeh rather than an area that was cut off. Pastels are very forgiving in a way that colored pencils aren't. Colored pencils are much more precise. You can get much more detail. But pastels have very good points in other directions. You know, let me think about that for a second. Okay. So, colored pencils are more precise. You can get more detail, less forgiving, and they take longer. Pastel pencils are brighter. What else? You can color much faster with them. They're a little bit messy. But you can get you can get more diffused looks, you can get softer looks much easier. Okay, now I decided to face my fears and go in and really make the black areas black. So I had to think about this for a second. So once again, I started in the areas that would be the darkest, and I was keeping in mind that the minute you touch a pastel pencil with some kind of blender, it gets much softer. I was just adding some highlights here before I finished, I guess because I was still nervous about it. It's nice to be able to go in an area that you already colored and put true white highlights in. And I didn't use the gel pen over this at all because the white pastel pencil made enough of a contrast and enough of a difference that I didn't feel like I needed to go in with the Signo gel pen. Okay, grabbing that black again and finally deciding, yep, I'm gonna give it a whirl. And if I ruin it, I ruin it. It's not the end of the world. And we all learn something from it. But actually, I didn't hate the results. In fact, I liked it much better. But I did do it a little bit differently than I would have with colored pencils. So I colored in the darkest areas and left more area just to blend, because you can take the pastels, like I said before, and move them around. So this looks like it's very wrong, and it would be if it was with colored pencils. But since you're able to take that blender, and I'll show you in a second, I can leave this and just pull the pigment into certain areas, and it's perfectly fine. So the closer that I got to the yellow, the more diffused it had to be, so it worked out great. So you can see I'm just barely touching it and pulling it out toward the lighter areas. And I'm leaving most of the area black, meaning I'm not going over and fussing the center parts of the black areas, just the edges, and I'm pulling them in toward the lighter areas. I hope that makes sense. I also realized right about here I could go closer to the leaves because the leaves aren't glowing. So somewhere along the line I realized I could make the very dark areas all the way up to the edges of the leaves, but not all the way up to the edges of the bokeh. Because you want the area around the bokeh to be diffused and soft. So right there, I realized I can get darker around the edges of the leaves. Oh, and by the way, that sharpener, that CONTE sharpener that I didn't know existed for far too long, is not on Amazon. I had to order it from someplace in the UK, and I'll put that link below also because that comes that comes in so handy, because before I was literally stuck using a razor blade and it took forever, and I actually found myself not using the CONTE pencils as much just because I hated sharpening them so much. I had my fingers crossed that the Mitsubishi K20 handheld crank sharpener was going to work, but it didn't. The Contes are too big. So that's about it for now. This was part 2 of BOKEH. Well, actually it's part 3 because I had the other purple one previously, and I'll link that below. I hope you liked this video. I think I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to do it in watercolors or markers. We'll see which one. So that's it for now. I hope you subscribe to me and you hit the little bell button so you're notified, because I'm going to be doing a really cool Prismacolor giveaway soon. And I hope you check out my new book, The Buns, on Amazon and in my Etsy store. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that you join me for my next video. So I will see you soon. Thank you. Bye.